Okay, today's topic for discussion will be the Crusades, basically known as a quest for the Holy Land, and a very important time period that happens in world history. Basically, the Crusades were a long series of wars that took place between Christians and Muslims, starting in the 1000s and finally finishing up in the 1200s and even into the 1300s. We have a series of wars fought in the Holy Land in the Middle East between Christians and Muslims. And the big thing they're fighting over is the city of Jerusalem. The reason they're fighting over the city of Jerusalem is because it was a holy land for three religions. For Christians, it was because Jesus was there, where he preached, where he lived, where he died. For Judaism, it was where kind of the center of Judaism was. It was the idea of the temple. King David was there. All those ideas were big in terms of Judaism. And lastly, for Islam as well. The Dome of the Rock, a very famous mosque, is in Jerusalem. This is the place that Muhammad was, according to Muslims, taken up into heaven, and a very important place for them as well. And so this city was kind of the center of this whole debate between Christians and Muslims. How the actual start happens is that Muslims, Seljuk Turks, took control of Jerusalem in the 1000s. And one of the things they did was limit access to Christians of Jerusalem. They didn't let some Christians make their pilgrimage, kind of their holy trip from Europe to Jerusalem. And even some Christian pilgrims said they were attacked. And so that's kind of one part of it. The other part of it was the issue of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire was really scared, really afraid that they were going to be attacked in Constantinople. They had owned Jerusalem before this and was fought over between them and the Seljuk Turks. And so the Byzantine Empire, the Greek Orthodox Christians, turned to the Pope, Roman Catholic Pope, and asked for help and said, "Hey, we're all Christians, we're all buds in a way. Why don't you help us out and we'll try and fix the situation?" And so we have this big call to arms. The Pope in 1096 makes a call to arms is Pope Urban II, and basically he made this big call to everybody saying, knights, Christians, come together. Let's go to the Holy Land, defeat the Turks, and take it back for Christians. And it was kind of a big call to arms made by Pope Urban II. So who answers this call? First off, you have feudal lords. These are the vassals. These are the high-ranking barons, the counts, those kind of high-ranking guys who are working for the kings and kind of controlling lots of land for the kings. Along with them came their knights that owed them military service, and also peasants as well who owed the knights military service. And so they all went with them and took the travel to the Middle East. Now, the question is why? Why would you pack up and head from Europe to the Middle East? A big part was religious. Obviously, I want to try and defend the religion. When the Pope says jump, you got to go. That was part of it. The other idea was wealth and title. Wealth being, if you went, you fought, and you did a good job, you might get money out of it, and the plunders of war and the spoils of war. Title is another thing. Title being advance your own status. How can you make yourself look better? How can you make yourself look more important and gain your notoriety, gain how people think about you in Europe? And lastly is territory. If you won the war, you might gain more territory, more land. And especially wealth and territory were big for poor knights. Not all knights were rich. Not all knights had a lot of land. Some knights were the second, third, fourth sons of a guy, and they weren't expecting to get a lot of land. And so you saw this as kind of like a get-rich-quick situation. I can jump in there quick. I can go in. I can get some money. I can get some land because I'm not getting much inheritance otherwise. So why don't I go and get some out of this situation? And that's where kind of some knights want to go fight because of this whole situation. As the first crusade, you can see the dashed line. They walked all the way to get there. So mostly from France, Holy Roman Empire, which is now modern day Germany, these knights walked the whole way from these areas over to Jerusalem. Walked here. They may have taken a boat through Italy to jump over here to Greece, but they walked the whole way. Some knights would ride their horses, but they're carrying all this armor, 30, 40 pounds of armor. They're carrying shields, supplies, weapons, horses, all that kind of stuff. If you were a peasant in the army, you walked. And so it was kind of, you walked the entire way, and then you had to go fight and try to win a war. Not a lot of guys made it this whole way due to exhaustion, due to sickness, due to illness, and so on and so forth. The first army was really a peasant army. They're untrained. They didn't have enough gear, enough equipment, those kind of things. And the peasant army didn't have any armor on, didn't have anything on them, really got killed off right away by the Muslim Turks as they rode in and cut them down. The knights, on the other hand, they succeeded. The knights came wearing metal plate armor, carrying big swords. And there was a story about how before a battlefield, one of the Arab leaders had come out and had a very sharp scimitar. It's a big type of curved sword. And he threw a piece of silk up in the air and dropped the sword, and it's cut right in half. The knight came up wearing his big heavy armor, had a big, huge, heavy, like 4 or 5 foot long sword, and swung and hacked a piece of metal in half. And because the knights were wearing heavy armor, those kind of things, the heavy knights, the guys on horseback, they rode in, they captured Jerusalem. And so these knight guys, they set up basically a crusader state. They set up Jerusalem in different districts, ruled by different guys, and ruled it as a Christian state after 1099. Um, well, shortly after that, 50 years after that, they all went home. They all went back home and took their spoils over with them. Eventually, Turks came back and took back much of the territory. They defeated the Crusader states, took them over, and the King of France and the Emperor of Germany sent more troops back for a second crusade. The guy who led the Muslim Turks to victory in the second crusade was a guy named Saladin. Saladin was kind of the English or the European name he was given. He was a great wise ruler. He was a really awesome ruler in terms of that. He was really, really wise. He was really, really kind. He would take guys in. He would give shelter to fallen enemies. He would nurse injured people back to health, and told people don't just kill everybody in sight. Christian Islam was a model of chivalry. We talked about that on Tuesday about how knights are supposed to act and act in a respectful, honorable way. And he was seen as being that kind of guy. You can kind of see how the Second Crusade went into the Dark Dash line. Same thing, walked the whole way there again. A few did take ships from Constantinople to Middle East, but beyond that, you mostly walked the whole way again. Same problems before. Tired, that kind of stuff. Except for this time, instead of winning, it was utter disaster. European armies, they got decimated by the Muslim armies, the Turk armies, and Muslims still controlled Jerusalem. Obviously, they can't be done yet. So we send a third army in. Third Crusade was led by 3 kings from Europe. First off, Frederick Barbarossa from Germany, emperor of kind of that Holy Roman Empire area. You have Philip II Augustus of France, and lastly, King Richard of England, also known as the Lionheart. Talk about him involving Prince John and the Magna Carta. When they got there, it was basically a stalemate. Thing is, they took ships to get there. You can see where it is here, England and France. The English and the French soldiers, they took ships all the way around. They got there faster, had less disease, had less strain on their soldiers. But at the same time, it was basically siege warfare. They went to these big cities on the coast. They used big catapults. Supposedly, King Richard had 4 gigantic catapults that could throw huge rocks the size of a man. He nicknamed them Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John after the 4 Gospels. It was basically a big siege warfare kind of thing, and the kings could never get away from the beaches. They could never get inland to take over Jerusalem. Unfortunately for the kings, Frederick Barbarossa, he died. He, I guess, accidentally slipped, fell into a river. He has his heavy armor on, so he drowned. Philip II headed back to France, so the last guy left was King Richard of Lionheart. And instead of fighting, continuing fighting and losing more guys, King Richard decided that he would make a peace treaty. And so Richard, and you have the Turk leader here, they met, they talked, they decided to sign a peace treaty that said Christians had access to the Holy Land, even though Muslims owned it. So basically, we're talking almost 300 years of war here, 200 years of war here, and things are right back to the way they were before. So it's really not much that really changed because of the whole Crusades. There were more Crusades after this. There were several more Crusades. There was a 4th Crusade where guys hopped on ships. They basically got as far as Constantinople. They raided Constantinople, tried to take it over. But there's no more victories for Christians. There was even something called a Children's Crusade. About 30,000 soldiers as young as 12 years old followed a kid from Germany who said, I'm going on a crusade. Finally, they went to the Pope in Rome, and they said, we're here to fight a crusade. The Pope laughed at him, told him to get the heck out of here and leave. About 20,000 went to Marseille, France. They were able to pay ship sailors a lot of money to take them as far away, and some of the ships sank. Some of the sailors dropped them off on islands, took their money. None of the kids ever made it to the Holy Land. So it's kind of a unique kind of story in terms of the Children's Crusade that took place at the same time as well. Basically, look at is the results of the Crusades. Even though nothing changed in the politics, Muslims still control Jerusalem. Christians get access to it. We still have improvements. Ships, maps, and explorers. You started moving out of Europe. Before this, you typically would not leave maybe a 5-mile radius of your home in Europe. You were stuck there a lot of times. Now people start traveling and moving out more. And you have better ships, have better maps, have better technology. We see feudalism start to decline because a lot of these knights and lords that went to fight, they died. Or they spent so much money in the military they had to give up their serfs. And so now we have a lot more freedom. Serfs get their freedom, peasants get their freedom because either they fought for the feudal lord or the feudal lords died, and now they have their freedom. Uh, the Turks still did rule the Holy Land. They would rule the Holy Land from then on. Europeans started to travel more, as I said before, because they finally left that little area around their home, got away, and actually went somewhere else. And because they were traveling more, we had trade. While the English and the French and the German knights were in the Middle East, they got to experience some Middle East products. And they started to like those ideas. They got to taste spices from India and Africa, sugar from Africa. They got to wear cotton clothing. They got to feel silks. They started wanting these kind of things. In fact, it's kind of funny. One of the funny stories to hear about the trade and about culture, it changes back and forth, is that typically European women did not wear makeup. Muslim, Middle Eastern women did. And when these European guys saw Middle Eastern women wearing makeup, they brought the makeup kind of stuff home and made European women wear makeup as well. And so wearing makeup even comes back that way as trade. And now we start seeing these good sugar, cotton, silk, spices, different kinds of foods, different kinds of other things come from the Middle East and trade back and forth with Europe. And so we start breaking out of this dark age, quote unquote, that may or may not exist, because we have trade happening in other parts of the world. The last really unfortunate thing is the last one here, which is anti-Semitism. You guys probably heard this last year in U.S. history with the Holocaust, but even though Jews have been living in Europe for a long time, there were attacks on Jews in Europe. First off, we're having a crusade against non-Christians, and Jews are non-Christians. So some Jews were attacked. And also, when they started looking at the situation, some of these Christian crusader guys blamed the Jews for Jesus' death and said, hey, these Jewish guys aren't good either, so we attacked them as well. And we start seeing a history of anti-Semitism then start in Europe because of this also. That should be the last of our little short lecture here. Make sure your notes are done for Thursday of this week. That's going to be February, my calendar here, February 6th. Make sure they're done for that day. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in class. Bye.